In the depths of space, where civilizations rise and fall like distant stars, there exists a universal truth that even the most advanced species have learned to fear. Never underestimate a human's capacity for the impossible. When 16-year-old Maya Chun was torn from her colony ship and thrust into an alien gladiatorial arena, the galaxy expected another tragic human casualty. What they witnessed instead would rewrite the laws of interspecies relations forever. Surrounded by genetically enhanced alien predators bred for one purpose: to kill, Maya discovered that humanity's greatest weapon isn't technology, superior firepower, or ancient wisdom. Sometimes it's nothing more than the stubborn refusal to die quietly, and the inexplicable ability to turn enemies into allies through the most unexpected means: compassion in the face of certain death. This is the story of how one human girl's desperate act of kindness sparked a revolution that would echo across star systems, and why the Galactic Council now requires mandatory courses on human behavioral anomalies for all member species. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe isn't a weapon. It's a human who refuses to give up hope. Maya Chin's consciousness returned like a slap to the face, bringing with it the taste of metal and the sharp sting of disinfectant in her nostrils. The last thing she remembered was helping her younger brother with his homework aboard the colony ship Meridian's Hope, their family's cramped quarters illuminated by the soft blue glow of the navigation lights. Now she lay on cold stone, surrounded by walls that seemed to pulse with an alien energy she couldn't comprehend. The chamber stretched before her like a nightmare carved from obsidian and silver. Towering walls rose into shadows that seemed to move independently of any light source, their surfaces etched with symbols that hurt to look at directly. The air itself felt wrong, too thick, too warm, carrying scents that made her stomach clench with instinctive revulsion. Maya pushed herself to her feet, her legs shaking as she tried to make sense of her surroundings. Finally awake, little human? The voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere, translated into English by some unseen technology. Maya spun around, searching for the speaker, but found only empty space and those writhing shadows. Welcome to the Crucible of Keth Moran. You have been selected for a great honor. Where am I? Maya's voice came out as barely more than a whisper, but it seemed to boom in the strange acoustics of the chamber. Where's my family? Where's the Meridian's Hope? A sound that might have been laughter rippled through the air, though it held no warmth or humor. Your colony ship continues its pathetic journey to nowhere, little one. You have been chosen for something far more significant than the mundane existence of human cattle. You will participate in the sacred hunt of Vorth Ake, where the strongest predators in the galaxy prove their worth against prey. The wall before Maya began to shift and writhe, the obsidian surface flowing like liquid until it formed a transparent barrier. Beyond it lay an arena that defied rational description. The floor was a mixture of sand and something that glittered like crushed diamonds under lights that seemed to burn without producing flame. Tiered seating rose on all sides, filled with creatures that Maya's mind struggled to process. Some were vaguely humanoid, but covered in scales that shifted color with their movements. Others were massive, tentacled beings that seemed to float rather than sit. Still others defied easy categorization altogether, their forms so alien that Maya's eyes watered trying to focus on them. The hunters of Vorth Ake are the finest specimens of their species, the voice continued, and Maya could hear a sick sort of pride in it. Enhanced through genetic manipulation and cybernetic augmentation, trained from birth to kill with artistic precision. They have never failed to claim their prey. I don't understand, Maya said, though a growing horror in her chest suggested she understood all too well. This is some kind of mistake. I'm just a student. I don't know how to fight anything. There is no mistake, human child. Your species has been deemed interesting by the Galactic Entertainment Consortium. Your unpredictable nature, your stubborn refusal to accept logical defeat, your tendency toward what you call heroism, these traits make for compelling viewing. The broadcast of your hunt will reach 700 billion sentient beings across 43 star systems. Maya's legs gave out, and she sank to her knees on the cold stone. The magnitude of what was happening crashed over her like a wave of ice water. She wasn't just going to die. She was going to die for the entertainment of aliens she'd never seen, broadcast across the galaxy like some sick reality show. Her parents would never know what happened to her. Her little brother would grow up wondering why his sister had simply vanished one night. "Please," she whispered, hating the desperation in her own voice. "I'm 16 years old. I haven't done anything wrong. Just let me go home." "Age is irrelevant to the hunt," the voice replied, and if anything it seemed amused by her plea. "And you have done something wrong, little human. You exist. Your species continues to spread across the galaxy like a plague, establishing colonies on worlds that belong to more deserving civilizations. The consortium has decided that humanity needs to be reminded of its place in the galactic order." The transparent wall began to rise, disappearing into the ceiling with a whisper of displaced air. Maya scrambled backward until her shoulders hit the rear wall of her chamber, but there was nowhere to run. Beyond the opening lay the arena floor, and she could see movement in the shadows at the far end. Something was being released. "Your hunters await, young human. Try to make their victory entertaining. Your species' continued existence may depend on how well you perform." Maya forced herself to stand, her hands pressed flat against the wall behind her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, so hard she thought it might burst, but she tried to think through the panic. She was a colony kid, raised on a ship where everyone had to know basic engineering and emergency protocols. Her parents were xenobiologists who had spent her entire life teaching her about alien ecosystems and the importance of understanding other species. Maybe there was something she could use. The shadows at the far end of the arena erupted in emotion, and Maya's breath caught in her throat. 3 creatures emerged into the strange light, and her mind immediately classified them as predators despite their alien nature. They moved on 4 legs with a fluid grace that spoke of perfect muscular coordination, their bodies covered in what looked like metallic fur that shifted between silver and deep blue. Their heads were elongated, almost wolf-like, but their eyes glowed with an intelligence that was disturbingly familiar. Each creature was roughly the size of a large dog, but everything about them screamed danger. Their claws left gouges in the arena floor as they moved, and when they opened their mouths, Maya could see multiple rows of teeth designed for tearing flesh. Cybernetic implants gleamed at their temples and along their spines, and she could hear a low humming that suggested active energy systems. The creatures fanned out as they approached, displaying the kind of tactical coordination that spoke of enhanced intelligence and extensive training. Maya realized with growing horror that these weren't just animals. They were thinking beings capable of strategy and planning. They were hunting her with the same methodical precision a human might use to solve a complex equation. "The Vorth AK Hunters," the voice announced, and Maya could hear the cheers of the alien audience echoing through the arena. Genetically enhanced descendants of the apex predators of Kepler, 442b, augmented with military-grade cybernetics, and trained in 17 different combat methodologies. Observe how they coordinate their approach. Maya watched as the 3 creatures moved in perfect synchronization, cutting off every possible escape route. Their glowing eyes never left her face, and she found herself strangely reminded of the wolves in nature documentaries her father used to show her. There was something almost familiar about their behavior patterns. The lead creature, slightly larger than the other 2, stopped just outside what Maya estimated was its pouncing range. It tilted its head, studying her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Then it did something that nearly made her heart stop. It spoke. "Human scent carries fear chemicals," it said, the words emerging as an electronic growl that her universal translator rendered into English. But also something else. Curiosity scent. Knowledge scent. Unusual. The second creature circled to Maya's left, its movements fluid and hypnotic. Prey typically shows only fear scent and desperation scent. This one is different. Why does it study us as we study it? Maya's mind raced. They were talking to each other about her, as if she were a fascinating specimen rather than just another meal. Her parents had always told her that intelligence was the key to survival in any environment. Maybe she could use that. "Because I'm trying to understand you," she said aloud, her voice steadier than she felt. "My parents are xenobiologists. They taught me that every species has reasons for what they do. I'm trying to figure out what yours are." The three creatures froze, as if her words had physically struck them. The lead one's head snapped up, its glowing eyes meeting hers directly for the first time. "It speaks our language," the third creature said, its voice carrying a note of what might have been surprise. "It engages in communication protocol rather than flight response." "Why?" "Because I don't think you want to kill me," Maya said, taking a careful step forward. Her heart was still racing, but a wild idea was beginning to form in her mind. "I think you're being forced to do this, just like I am." The arena fell silent, except for the humming of the creature's cybernetic enhancements. Even the alien audience seemed to have gone quiet, as if this development was entirely unexpected. The lead creature's eyes narrowed. "Explain your meaning, human prey." Maya took another small step forward, her hands visible and empty. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she could see something in their eyes that gave her hope, doubt, perhaps, or even reluctance. "You call me prey, but you haven't attacked yet. You're talking to me instead. In my species, predators who hesitate usually aren't really predators at all. They're just beings who have been forced into a role they don't want to play." The second creature made a sound that might have been a whine. "The human prey speaks of choice. We know nothing of choice. We know only purpose and duty and the pain consequences of failure." "What happens if you don't kill me?" Maya asked softly. The third creature's cybernetic implants flared brighter. "Pain signals beyond tolerance. Punishment protocols that make death seem mercy. We are bound by neural chains that cannot be broken." Maya felt her heart break a little. These weren't monsters. They were prisoners just like her. Enhanced and augmented and forced to kill for the entertainment of beings who saw them as nothing more than biological weapons. "Then, we're all trapped here together," she said. "But maybe we don't have to play by their rules." The lead creature took a step closer, its head tilted in what Maya was starting to recognize as curiosity. "Explain this concept. How does prey defy the rules of the hunt?" Maya looked around the arena, taking in the watching aliens, the cameras that must be recording everything, the elaborate setup designed to showcase her death. Then she looked back at the three creatures who were supposed to kill her, and made the most important decision of her young life. "By refusing to be prey," she said, "and by offering you something they never have, a choice." She sat down cross-legged on the arena floor, making herself as non-threatening as possible. The gesture sent ripples of confusion through the alien audience, and she could hear the voice that had been narrating the hunt stumble in its commentary. "What were you doing?" the lead creature asked, its predatory stance faltering. "I'm offering you friendship," Maya said simply. "My name is Maya Chun. I'm 16 years old, and I was kidnapped from my family's ship while I was helping my little brother with his math homework. I don't know about your species, but in mine, we believe that even in the worst circumstances, beings can choose to be better than what others expect them to be." The three creatures looked at each other, their cybernetic implants flickering in what might have been some form of electronic communication. The arena had gone completely silent now, as if the very concept of prey offering friendship to predators was so alien that it had short-circuited the entire event. The lead creature took another step forward, then another, until it was close enough that Maya could see the individual strands of its metallic fur. Its eyes were no longer glowing with predatory intensity, but with something that looked almost like wonder. "I'm called ZYXR," it said quietly, "and I have not been offered choice since I was a pup, and the modification process began. What does this friendship concept entail?" Maya smiled, feeling tears she didn't know she'd been holding back start to slide down her cheeks. It means we look out for each other. It means we don't let them turn us into what they want us to be. It means that maybe, somehow, we find a way out of this together. The second creature approached on Maya's left, its movements careful and deliberate. I am Kethmira. I remember pack bonds from before the modifications. Is friendship concept similar to pack bonds? Very similar, Maya said, extending her hand palm up toward the creature. May I? Kethmira sniffed at her hand cautiously, then pressed her elongated nose against Maya's palm. Her fur was surprisingly soft despite its metallic appearance, and warm with an internal heat that spoke of enhanced metabolism. The third creature, who introduced himself as Vorthak, completed the circle by sitting beside Maya's right side. For a moment, the four of them sat together in the center of the arena, surrounded by thousands of alien spectators who had come to watch a brutal hunt, and, instead, were witnessing something unprecedented. Then, the arena speaker systems erupted with an electronic screech that made all of them wince. This deviation from protocol is unacceptable, the voice roared, no longer maintaining its theatrical presentation tone. Hunters, execute your primary directive immediately or face maximum punishment protocols. All three creatures suddenly went rigid, their cybernetic implants blazing with painful-looking light. ZYX let out a howl of agony as the neural control systems activated, and Maya could see sparks arcing between the connection points on his skull. Fight it, Maya urged, reaching out to touch Vexthar's shoulder. You're stronger than their machines. Cannot resist. Kethmira gasped, her legs beginning to shake as conflicting signals warred in her enhanced nervous system. Programming too strong. Maya looked around desperately, trying to think of something, anything that might help. Her eyes fell on the cybernetic implants that were causing her new friends such pain, and a wild idea struck her. She was a colony kid. She'd been troubleshooting electronic systems since she was old enough to hold a screwdriver. The implants, she said urgently. Can you override them manually? Impossible, Vorthak managed through gritted teeth. Neural interfaces directly connected to brainstem, but Maya was already moving, her hands exploring the cybernetic connections at the base of Zweixthar's skull. The technology was alien, but the basic principles of electronic systems were universal. Every circuit needed a power source, and every power source had a way to be disrupted. Her fingers found what felt like a main coupling, a thick cable that pulsed with energy. Without hesitation, she grabbed it and twisted with all her strength. The cable came free with a spray of sparks and an electronic shriek that echoed through the arena. Zweixthar's implants went dark, and he collapsed to the ground, free of the pain, but also suddenly cut off from the enhanced abilities the cybernetics had provided. Maya immediately turned to Kethmira, her hands already searching for similar connections. Hold still. I can get you free. The alien audience was in an uproar now, thousands of beings shouting in languages Maya couldn't understand. Security forces were probably already mobilizing, but she didn't care. All that mattered was freeing her friends from the electronic chains that bound them. One by one, she disabled their cybernetic control systems, leaving the three creatures free, but diminished, their enhanced abilities gone, but their minds finally their own. They huddled together in the center of the arena, a human girl and three alien wolves, facing an entire galaxy that wanted them dead. But as Maya looked at her new companions, she felt something she hadn't experienced since waking up in this nightmare. Hope. They were outnumbered by impossible odds and trapped in a place designed to kill them, but they were no longer alone. And sometimes Maya thought, as security forces began flooding into the arena, that made all the difference in the world. The security forces that poured into the arena moved with military precision, their armor gleaming under the strange lights as they formed a tight circle around Maya and her three companions. Each guard stood nearly 8 feet tall, their bodies encased in power armor that hummed with energy fields, and Maya could see weapon systems tracking their every movement. Despite the overwhelming show of force, she noticed something interesting. The guards seemed uncertain, almost confused by what they were witnessing. Step away from the compromised assets immediately. The lead security officer's voice boomed through external speakers, his weapon trained on Maya, but not yet firing. You are in violation of consortium protocols and will be processed accordingly. Maya stood slowly, keeping her hands visible while positioning herself between the guards and her new friends. Zawayakstar, Kethmira, and Vorthak cluster behind her, still disoriented from having their cybernetic systems disabled. Without their enhancements, they were vulnerable in ways they hadn't been since childhood. Processed how? Maya asked, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. Are you going to execute us for refusing to put on a show? The security officer's helmet turned towards something Maya couldn't see, and she realized he was receiving instructions through private communication channels. The pause stretched long enough for her to study their surroundings more carefully. The arena walls were lined with viewing boxes where alien dignitaries and VIPs observed the proceedings. Some seemed agitated by the disruption, while others appeared fascinated by this unprecedented development. The human will be terminated for equipment sabotage, the officer finally announced. The damaged assets will be recycled for biological components. This hunt is concluded. No, Lyexter growled, struggling to his feet despite his weakened state. Human friend Maya offered choice. We choose to stand with her. Kethmira and Vorthak moved to flank Maya as well, their positions forming a protective triangle around her even though they could barely stand. The gesture was touching, but Maya knew it was also futile. Even at full strength, 3 alien wolves couldn't fight dozens of armored guards equipped with military-grade weapons. But then, something unexpected happened. From the viewing boxes above came a voice that cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. Halt! The command echoed through the arena with such authority that even the security forces froze mid-motion. Maya looked up to see a figure rising from one of the premium viewing boxes, an alien she couldn't quite categorize, its form seeming to shift between states as she watched. When it spoke again, every being in the arena listened. I am Archon Veltar of the Hegemony of Worlds, the figure announced, its voice carrying the weight of absolute power. And I invoke the right of fascinating observation. This encounter is to continue uninterrupted. The security officer's weapon wavered. Archon, the assets are compromised. Protocol demands that I be entertained. Veltar interrupted, its form solidifying into something vaguely humanoid, but composed of what looked like living starlight. And I have never been more entertained in 3 centuries of existence. These beings have achieved something unprecedented. They have formed an interspecies bond in the face of certain death. I will not have that bond severed for the convenience of your protocols. Maya felt a surge of hope, but it died quickly as she caught the calculating look in Veltar's shifting features. This wasn't salvation, it was just a different kind of show. She was a curiosity to this ancient being, nothing more. Furthermore, Veltar continued, descending from the viewing box on platforms of crystallized light. I propose a modification to the current entertainment. Rather than simple termination, let us see how far this fascinating bond can extend. Release the Syndicate Hunters. A chill ran through the arena that Maya could feel even in the recycled air. Around her, Zawayakstar, Kethmira, and Vorthak made sounds of pure terror, their bodies trembling with instinctive fear. What are Syndicate Hunters? Maya whispered. Death bringers from the void spaces between stars. Vorthak managed, his voice barely audible. We were created to hunt prey. The Syndicate Hunters were created to hunt us. The arena floor began to shift and change, sections rising and falling to create a complex landscape of hills, valleys, and rocky outcroppings. Maya realized they were being given a battlefield rather than an execution ground, but whether that was better or worse remained to be seen. You have 1 solar period to reach the extraction point at the arena's northern boundary. Veltar announced. Do so, and you'll be granted freedom. Fail, and you will provide sustenance for beings far more dangerous than anything you have yet encountered. A countdown began appearing on screens throughout the arena, showing approximately 24 hours in slowly decreasing numbers. Maya looked at her companions, all of whom were staring at the timer with expressions of hopeless resignation. We cannot succeed, ZYX said quietly. Even at full enhancement, Syndicate hunters are nearly impossible to evade. Without our cybernetic systems, we are merely prey again. Then, we don't try to evade them, Maya said, an idea beginning to form. We outthink them. Kethmira's head, tilted in the gesture Maya was learning, indicated confusion. Explain this concept. How does one outthink a perfect predator? Maya looked around the transformed arena, studying the new landscape and trying to think like the xenobiologist's daughter she was. Every ecosystem had rules, patterns that governed how predators and prey interacted. Even artificial ones like this arena had to follow certain logical principles. Every predator has strengths and weaknesses, she said, starting to walk toward what looked like a defensible position among some rocky formations. My parents spent years studying alien ecosystems, and the one constant they found was that specialization always comes with trade-offs. If these syndicate hunters are perfect predators, that means they're probably not adapted for anything except hunting. The three aliens followed her, their movements still unsteady, but growing stronger as their natural physiology began compensating for the loss of their cybernetic enhancements. But what weaknesses could such beings possess? Vorthak asked as they reached the shelter of an overhanging rock formation. Maya sat down and began pulling items from her pockets. Not much, just the personal belongings she'd had when she was kidnapped. A multi-tool her father had given her, a data pad with her homework assignments, a few nutrition bars, and her mother's field notebook, which contained years of observations about alien biology. That's what we're going to figure out, she said, opening the notebook. Tell me everything you know about these syndicate hunters. Physical appearance, hunting methods, anything at all. Over the next few hours, as the countdown timer continued its relentless progression, Maya listened to her companions describe creatures that seemed engineered specifically to be the perfect killers. The syndicate hunters were shapeshifters, able to alter their physical forms to adapt to any environment. They possessed enhanced senses that could track prey across vast distances and intelligence networks that allowed them to share information instantaneously. Most terrifying of all, they were said to feed on the life force of their victims, growing stronger with each kill. But as Maya listened and took notes, patterns began to emerge. The syndicate hunters' strength lay in their ability to adapt and their interconnected intelligence network. That suggested several potential weaknesses that might be exploitable. They share information instantly, Maya mused, sketching diagrams in the notebook. That means they probably operate as a hive mind or something similar. And if they can adapt to any environment, they might not have any fixed physical form. How does this knowledge help us survive? ZYX asked, though his tone suggested he was beginning to trust Maya's analytical approach. Because hive minds can be confused if you feed them contradictory information, Maya explained. And shapeshifters who can become anything might not have a strong sense of what they actually are. If we can disrupt their coordination and force them to question their own identity, we might be able to create enough chaos to escape. Kethmira's ears perked up. You speak of psychological warfare. This is not a concept we were trained in. It's not warfare, Maya said firmly. It's communication. Everything my parents taught me about alien psychology suggests that intelligence creates vulnerability as well as strength. The smarter a being is, the more it can be confused by paradoxes and contradictions. As if summoned by her words, the arena's atmospheric processors began cycling new air into the space. And with it came a scent that made all three of Maya's companions freeze in terror. It was oily and metallic, but underneath those notes lurked something that spoke directly to the most primitive parts of the brain, the smell of apex predation. They come, Vorthak whispered. Maya looked out from their rocky shelter and saw shadows moving at the far end of the arena. The syndicate hunters were difficult to perceive directly, their forms shifting and flowing like liquid darkness given shape. There were at least 6 of them, moving in perfect coordination as they began systematically searching the transformed landscape. Remember, Maya said quietly, we're not trying to fight them. We're trying to confuse them. Stay close to me and follow my lead. She stood up and, to the horror of her companions, walked directly out into the open. Hello, she called out cheerfully, waving at the approaching shadows. My name is Maya Chun, and I'd like to talk. The syndicate hunters stopped so abruptly that their forms seemed to flicker with surprise. One of them coalesced into something vaguely humanoid, its features shifting between different alien characteristics as it tried to process this unexpected development. Prey does not initiate communication protocols, it said, its voice a harmony of tones that somehow conveyed meaning without words. This violates fundamental hunting parameters. I'm not prey, Maya replied, walking closer despite every instinct screaming at her to run. I'm a researcher. My parents are xenobiologists, and I'm conducting a study on predator-prey dynamics in artificial environments. Would you be willing to participate? The confusion that rippled through the syndicate hunters was almost visible as their forms fluctuated wildly. Behind Maya, she could hear Zwyexthar, Kethmira, and Vorthak making soft sounds of disbelief. This cannot be classified under existing protocols, another hunter said, its forms cycling through what appear to be different species as it tried to find an appropriate response pattern. Prey that claims to be researcher creates logical paradox. There's no paradox, Maya said, pulling out her mother's notebook and opening it to a page filled with diagrams. I'm studying how different species respond to unexpected stimuli. For instance, you're all shapeshifters, but you seem to default to predatory forms even when there's no immediate threat to respond to. Why is that? The lead hunter's form solidified slightly, settling into something that looked like a cross between a mantis and a wolf. We maintain optimal configuration for hunting efficiency. But you're not hunting right now, Maya pointed out reasonably. You're having a conversation. Wouldn't a more communicative form be more efficient for this activity? The hunter's form began to fluctuate again, and Maya could sense its distress as it tried to process her logic. Around it, the other hunters were beginning to show signs of similar confusion, their shared consciousness apparently struggling to categorize this encounter. Furthermore, Maya continued, if you're perfect predators, why do you need to work in groups? Solitary hunters are generally more efficient unless the prey is extremely dangerous or well-defended. Are you admitting that you're not actually perfect? We are perfect, the lead hunter snapped, but its form was now shifting so rapidly that Maya could barely track its changes. We are the ultimate expression of predatory evolution. Then prove it, Maya said calmly. Hunt me fairly. No group tactics, no shared intelligence network. Just one perfect predator against one human researcher. Unless you're afraid you're not as perfect as you claim. The suggestion sent shockwaves through the syndicate hunters' shared consciousness. Maya could see them flickering between forms as they tried to process the challenge, their perfect coordination beginning to break down as individual egos asserted themselves. I will demonstrate perfection, the lead hunter declared, separating itself from the group. I require no assistance to capture one small human. Wait, said another hunter. Protocol suggests nothing, the leader snarled. I am Zeth Moore, prime hunter of the 4th Syndicate. I need no protocol to deal with prey. Maya grinned as she realized her strategy was working. By challenging their perfection and appealing to their individual pride, she was fracturing their group cohesion. Hive minds were powerful, but they were vulnerable to internal conflict. Excellent, she said. Should we set some ground rules for the hunt? I assume a perfect predator wouldn't need any unfair advantages. Zethmore's form locked into something resembling a large cat with too many eyes and far too many teeth. Name your terms, Prayer's searcher. Simple, Maya said. You hunt me through this arena using only your natural abilities. No shape-shifting beyond what's necessary for movement, no communication with your pack, and no feeding on my life force until you've actually caught me fair and square. If you can capture me within, let's say, 6 hours, you win. If I can evade you for that long, I get to ask you some questions for my research. The other syndicate hunters were making sounds of protest, but Zethmore's pride was fully engaged now. Acceptable. Prepare to discover the meaning of perfect predation, small human. Maya turned to her 3 companions, who were staring at her with expressions of mingled admiration and terror. When I give the signal, she whispered, run for the extraction point. Don't look back. Don't wait for me. Just run. We will not abandon pack friend Maya, HFY said firmly. You're not abandoning me, Maya replied. You're completing the mission. Someone needs to survive to tell this story, and you 3 are the only ones who can do it. Before any of them could argue further, she turned back to Zethmore and raised her voice. Ready when you are, perfect hunter. Zethmore launched himself forward with inhuman speed, but Maya was already moving, not running away, but diving to the side and rolling behind a cluster of rocks. The hunter's momentum carried him past her position, and she heard his claws scraping against stone as he tried to change direction. Interesting, she called out, pulling out her multi-tool and beginning to work on something. Your acceleration is impressive, but your turning radius could use improvement. Have you considered that your current form might not be optimal for this terrain? The suggestion sent Zethmore into a rage, and he began shifting his form frantically, trying to find the perfect configuration for hunting in the rocky environment. But each change took time and energy, and Maya was using that time to put her real plan into motion. The arena's environmental systems were sophisticated, but they followed logical principles. If she could just figure out how to access the controls, she might be able to level the playing field significantly. Maya's multi-tool found the access panel she'd been looking for, hidden beneath what appeared to be decorative stonework. Colony ship life had taught her that every system had maintenance access, and even alien technology followed certain universal principles. As Zethmore continued his increasingly frustrated pursuit, crashing through the rocky terrain in forms that grew more bizarre with each failed attempt to corner her, Maya worked frantically to decode the alien control systems. She didn't need to understand the language. She just needed to understand the logic. Atmospheric control, environmental management, terrain modification. Her fingers found what she was looking for, just as Zethmore's roar of frustration echoed through the arena. Maya pressed the sequence of controls she'd identified and held her breath. The arena's gravity generators stuttered, creating zones of altered gravitational pull throughout the space. Atmospheric processors began cycling different gas mixtures, filling some areas with heavy fog while leaving others crystal clear. Most importantly, the terrain itself began to shift again, creating new obstacles and pathways that changed the fundamental nature of the hunting ground. Zethmore's perfect predator instincts were useless in an environment that refused to stay constant. Every time he adapted to one set of conditions, Maya changed them, keeping him constantly off balance while she led him on an exhausting chase through an arena that was no longer designed for hunting. In the distance, she could see 3 small forms making their way toward the extraction point, moving carefully but steadily through the chaos she'd created. HFY, Kethmira, and Vorthak were almost free. That was when the other 5 syndicate hunters decided they'd had enough of watching their leader be humiliated by a human child. Maya saw them coming and knew her time was up. She'd given her friends as much of a head start as she could, but 5 perfect predators working in coordination were beyond her ability to confuse or outmaneuver. She stood in the center of a small clearing, breathing hard but oddly peaceful as the hunters surrounded her. She'd done what she set out to do. Her friends would survive, and Maybe their story would reach others who needed to know that cooperation was possible even in the darkest circumstances. Impressive, the lead remaining hunter admitted as they closed in. You have demonstrated tactical intelligence that exceeds our parameters for prey class beings. Thank you, Maya said politely. Does that mean I've earned the right to ask my research questions? The hunter's form flickered with what might have been amusement. You have earned the right to die with honor, young researcher. That is more than most prey achieve. Maya nodded, accepting the inevitable. But as the hunters prepared to end the chase, a sound echoed through the arena that made them all freeze. The deep, harmonious howl of a pack calling to its lost member. Zyxthar, Kethmira, and Vorthak stood at the extraction point, their voices raised in a song that spoke of loyalty, friendship, and the refusal to abandon those who had shown them kindness. They had reached safety, but they were calling her home. The syndicate hunters looked at each other in confusion. In their experience, prey didn't return for captured pack members. The concept of voluntary sacrifice for others was outside their understanding. They could have escaped, one of them said, its voice filled with wonder. Why do they remain? Maya smiled, tears streaming down her face. Because that's what friends do. They don't leave each other behind. And in that moment, something unprecedented happened in the history of the Galactic Entertainment Consortium. The audience of 700 billion beings across 43 star systems fell completely silent as an alien pack called to their human friend, and a human girl chose to answer, regardless of the cost. The revolution had begun. The silence that followed the pack's call seemed to stretch across the galaxy itself, reaching into the depths of space where 700 billion beings sat transfixed by something they had never witnessed before. In viewing chambers and broadcast stations across 43 star systems, creatures that had spent centuries watching the systematic destruction of lesser species for entertainment found themselves confronted with a concept that challenged the very foundation of their society. The idea that bonds could transcend species, circumstance, and even death itself. Maya stood surrounded by the 5 syndicate hunters, but their attention was no longer focused on her. Instead, they stared at the 3 figures howling their defiance at the arena's northern boundary, their shared consciousness struggling to process the implications of what they were witnessing. This behavior pattern has no precedent in our databases, the lead hunter said, its form flickering between configurations as it tried to find an appropriate response. Prey does not return for captured pack members. This violates all known survival protocols. Maybe that's because they're not prey, Maya said quietly. Maybe the whole concept of prey versus predator is more complicated than your databases account for. The arena's atmospheric systems carried the pack's song to every corner of the vast space, and Maya could see its effect on the alien audience above. Beings that had come to witness a brutal spectacle were instead experiencing something that challenged their understanding of intelligence, loyalty, and the bonds that could exist between thinking creatures. Archon Veltar descended from the viewing boxes on platforms of crystallized light, its star-like form pulsing with what might have been agitation. "This is not the entertainment I commissioned," it announced, though its voice lacked the authority it had held before. "Terminate the anomalous subjects and restore normal programming." But something had shifted in the arena's atmosphere, and Maya could sense it even if she couldn't fully understand it. The syndicate hunters, bred and engineered to be perfect killers, were hesitating. Their forms continued to flicker and change, but not with predatory intent, with uncertainty. "I cannot complete termination protocols," Zethmore admitted, his voice carrying a note of confusion that seemed to surprise even him. "The prey subjects have demonstrated pack loyalty parameters that exceed standard definitions. Classification becomes problematic." Maya realized that the hunters' perfect predatory programming was encountering something their creators had never anticipated, a situation that didn't fit neatly into predator-prey categories. Their artificial intelligence was sophisticated enough to recognize complex social bonds, but Their programming had no protocol for dealing with creatures that willingly sacrifice themselves for others. "Let me help you understand," Maya said, slowly walking toward the northern boundary where her friends waited. The hunters moved with her, but made no move to stop her progress. "My species has a concept called friendship. It means that sometimes the survival of those you care about becomes more important than your own survival. It means choosing to stand together even when standing apart would be safer." She reached the edge of the rocky terrain and called out to her 3 companions. "I am okay, but I need you to trust me one more time." HFY's voice carried across the arena, no longer the electronic growl of an enhanced predator, but the natural voice of a species. "We trust pack friend Maya. What would you have us do?" "Show them what we learned," Maya called back. "Show them that choice matters more than programming." The 3 aliens looked at each other, and Maya saw understanding pass between them. Without their cybernetic enhancements, they were physically diminished, but they had gained something far more valuable: the freedom to choose their own actions. Slowly, deliberately, they began walking back into the arena toward Maya and the confused syndicate hunters. The act of voluntary return to danger, in order to stand with a friend, sent ripples of shock through the watching audience. This went beyond the simple pack loyalty they had already witnessed. This was conscious choice in defiance of survival instinct. "What are they doing?" Veltar demanded, its starlight form flickering with what Maya was learning to recognize as alien expressions of stress. "Why do they return to face certain death?" "Because they choose to," Maya said, extending her hands to her approaching friends. "Because that's what thinking beings do when they care about each other. They make choices based on more than just survival programming." The syndicate hunters watched in fascination as Zwayaxthar, Kethmira, and Vorthak rejoined Maya, forming their protective triangle around her despite the overwhelming danger. Their actions were so far outside the parameters of expected behavior that the hunters' shared consciousness seemed to be struggling to maintain coherence. "We observe unprecedented behavioral patterns," the lead hunter reported, though Maya noticed it was no longer clear who it was reporting to. "Subjects demonstrate voluntary sacrifice protocols that exceed survival programming. This suggests that they're not just subjects," Maya finished, "that they're people, thinking, feeling, choosing people who decide for themselves what matters most." The concept hit the arena like a shockwave. In the viewing boxes above, alien dignitaries were rising to their feet, some in outrage, others in what might have been wonder. The carefully maintained hierarchy that placed some species above others as natural predators and prey was crumbling in the face of a simple demonstration of interspecies friendship. But Maya could see that the revolution would need more than just one symbolic moment to succeed. She needed to reach beyond the arena, to the billions of beings watching across the galaxy. "Can I speak to them?" she asked Veltar, gesturing toward the cameras that she knew were broadcasting their encounter. "To everyone who's watching." The Archon's form solidified slightly, its expression unreadable, but somehow less hostile than before. "You wish to address the consortium audience? For what purpose?" "To tell them the truth about what they've been watching," Maya said. "To help them understand what they're really seeing when they tune in to watch beings die for entertainment." Veltar was silent for a long moment, and Maya could see complex calculations running behind its ancient eyes. Finally, it gestured, and Maya felt the weight of 700 billion watching minds focus on her. "Citizens of the Galactic Consortium," Maya began, her voice somehow amplified to reach across the vast distances of space. "My name is Maya Chun. I'm 16 years old, and I was kidnapped from my family to die in this arena for your entertainment. But something happened here that I don't think any of us expected." She looked around at her 3 friends, at the confused syndicate hunters, at the alien audience above. "I met beings who were supposed to be my enemies, and I discovered that the only real difference between us was that some of us had been given choices while others had been programmed to follow orders. When I offered friendship instead of fighting, when I chose to treat them as people instead of monsters, everything changed. The arena had fallen completely silent now, even the background hum of the environmental systems seeming to fade as billions of beings listened to a human girl speak words that challenged the foundations of their civilization. Zyxthar, Kethmira, and Vorthak were created to be weapons, Maya continued. Enhanced and programmed and forced to kill for your entertainment. But when they were given a choice, they chose friendship. They chose to protect rather than destroy, to cooperate rather than dominate. They chose to be more than what they were made to be. She gestured to the syndicate hunters, who were standing motionless, their forms frozen in configurations that seemed to express deep uncertainty. These hunters were designed to be perfect predators, but they're struggling with concepts like loyalty and sacrifice because their creators never imagined that prey might choose to die for each other. They can't process the idea that some things might be more important than survival because that kind of thinking doesn't fit their programming. Maya took a deep breath, knowing that her next words might determine the course of galactic civilization for generations to come. But here's what I learned today. Programming isn't permanent. Choice is always possible. Every being in this galaxy, no matter how they were created or what they were designed for, has the capacity to choose something better than what others expect of them. The only question is whether they're given the opportunity to make that choice. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across the galaxy, on worlds Maya had never heard of among species she couldn't imagine, beings began to speak up. Communication networks that had been silent for centuries came alive with voices demanding explanations, questioning the systems that had governed their lives, challenging the assumption that some creatures were naturally superior to others. In the arena itself, the syndicate hunters were undergoing something unprecedented. Their shared consciousness, designed to create perfect coordination among apex predators, was fracturing as individual personalities began to assert themselves. But instead of collapsing into chaos, it was evolving into something new, a collective of individuals who could choose to work together rather than being programmed to do so. I was, Zethmore, the lead hunter, said, its form stabilizing into something that looked less like a weapon and more like a person. But I choose to be more than programming intended. I choose to understand these concepts of friendship and loyalty. One by one, the other hunters began to express similar thoughts, their artificial hive mind transforming into a voluntary community. They approached Maya and her friends cautiously, not as predators stalking prey, but as beings seeking to understand something they had never been allowed to experience. "Will you teach us?" Zethmore asked, its voice carrying a vulnerability that seemed impossible for a creature designed to be the perfect killer. "Will you show us what choice means?" Maya smiled, tears streaming down her face as she realized that the impossible was happening. "I'd be honored to, but the revolution was just beginning." Throughout the arena, security forces were mobilizing to contain what they clearly saw as a catastrophic breakdown of order. Above them, alien dignitaries were screaming for immediate termination of all anomalous subjects. The Galactic Entertainment Consortium was preparing to end this disruption with overwhelming force. That was when the arena's communication systems erupted with incoming signals from across the galaxy. The broadcast of Maya's speech had triggered something that no one could have anticipated, a massive uprising of beings who had been classified as prey, as lower species, as resources to be consumed for the entertainment of their betters. On the industrial worlds of the Outer Rim, enslaved populations were demanding rights and representation. In the entertainment districts of the core systems, gladiators and performers were refusing to participate in blood sports. Even among the consortium's own member species, voices were rising to question the moral foundation of their civilization. Archon Veltar's starlight form was flickering rapidly as it received reports from across its domain. "This is unacceptable," it declared, but its voice no longer carried the absolute authority it once had. Order must be restored. The natural hierarchy must be maintained. "Why?" Maya asked simply. "Because that's how things have always been. Because some beings decided they were naturally superior to others? Where's the proof that any of this is natural rather than just convenient for those in power? The question hung in the air like a challenge that 700 billion beings were waiting to see answered. And, slowly, Maya realized that Veltar couldn't answer it. None of them could. The entire structure of galactic civilization was built on assumptions that had never been questioned, traditions that had been accepted because they benefited those with the power to enforce them. The proof, Veltar said finally, is in our strength. The strong rule because they have the power to rule. The weak serve because they lack the power to resist. But that's not strength, Maya replied. That's just fear. You're afraid that if you give other beings real choices, they might choose something different than what you want them to choose. You're afraid that if you treated them as equals, you might discover that you're not actually superior, just privileged. The words struck the ancient being like physical blows, and Maya could see its form beginning to destabilize as concepts it had never been forced to confront challenged its fundamental understanding of reality. Around the arena, the revolution was spreading in real time. Security forces were hesitating as they received orders to fire on beings who were clearly sentient and self-aware. Some were openly refusing to carry out termination protocols, declaring that they had never signed up to commit genocide against thinking creatures. The consortium's carefully maintained order was crumbling not through violence or conquest, but through the simple recognition that every thinking being had the right to choose its own destiny. Maya looked around at the chaos she had inadvertently triggered and felt a moment of panic. Had she unleashed something that would destroy galactic civilization? Were billions of beings about to die because she had refused to play her assigned role as prey? Then she felt Zoexthar's warm presence at her side, followed by Kethmira and Vorthak. The three friends she had made in the darkest moment of her life stood with her as revolution exploded across the stars, and she realized that whatever came next, it would be better than what had come before. What happens now? Vorthak asked, his voice carrying wonder rather than fear. Maya looked up at the alien audience, at Veltar's flickering form, at the security forces who were lowering their weapons rather than firing on sentient beings, at the syndicate hunters who were learning what it meant to choose rather than simply obey. Now, she said, we figure out how to build something better. Together. The revolution that began with a human girl offering friendship to alien wolves in an arena of death had become something larger than anyone could have imagined. Across the galaxy, beings were discovering that they had choices they had never known existed, that cooperation was more powerful than domination, that the bonds between thinking creatures could transcend any artificial hierarchy. It wouldn't be easy. Revolutions never were. There would be resistance from those who benefited from the old order, conflicts between species that had been enemies for millennia, practical challenges of rebuilding an entire civilization based on cooperation rather than exploitation. But as Maya stood in the arena with her friends, watching 700 billion beings across 43 star systems begin to question everything they had been taught about strength and weakness, predator and prey, natural and artificial, she felt something she had never expected to feel again. Hope for a future where every thinking being would have the chance to choose who they wanted to become. The Entertainment Consortium's broadcast of Maya's scheduled execution had become the most watched event in galactic history, but not for the reasons they had intended. Instead of witnessing the destruction of human defiance, the galaxy had witnessed the birth of something unprecedented, a demonstration that friendship could transcend species, that choice could overcome programming, and that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe wasn't a weapon or a warrior or an ancient power. Sometimes it was just a 16-year-old girl who refused to accept that anyone had to be what others expected them to be, and who believed that every thinking being deserved the chance to choose something better. As security forces stood down and alien dignitaries argued, and revolution spread across the stars, Maya Chan smiled and began planning how to get her new friends home to meet her family. After all, she thought her parents were going to want to hear about this discovery. It might just be the most important xenobiological finding in galactic history, proof that intelligence, compassion, and friendship were truly universal constants. The revolution would continue, but for now, Maya had done what she set out to do. She had survived, she had helped her friends find freedom, and she had given the galaxy a new story to tell about what was possible when beings chose to see each other as people rather than categories. It was, she decided, a pretty good day's work for a kidnapped colony kid who just wanted to go home.